Hello and welcome to the Future Takes series, where we're asking people about how we might achieve a more reconciled island of Ireland in the years ahead. I am absolutely delighted to be in the studio of Colin Davidson today. What a place to be to discuss this matter, Colin. But I'll start with that title, Future Takes. Can the future exist without the past and the present? How much do we have to think about the three tenses when we start looking into the future at all?
Well, the future from the present tense is an ideal, or it's something to be fearful of, or it's something that we feel that we can shape right now. I think the past is what has got us to where we are now. There's nothing we can do to shape that. There's nothing we can do to in any way counteract our actions in the past. But I think very much when I think about that with myself, the past is there so that we can to learn from it for ourselves, to build on that, to develop from that, to counteract those things that we got wrong, to learn from those things that maybe we feel we got right. I tend to be the sort of person that is very, very hopeful for the future, not fearful.
When I think of you and your works and your portraiture in particular, one of the first set of works that comes to my mind is Silent Testimonies, which deals with the past. It deals with people who have experienced loss through the Northern Irish Troubles. How can those people move forward from that? How can we do that?
I mean, that's a question which I can't answer at all. And it's a question which I have struggled with, and it's probably the question which encouraged and prompted me to embark on making that series of paintings to start off with. How can anybody pick up the pieces of their own life and get on with it? And that is what I was attempting to highlight, to acknowledge in my own way as an artist. So that's a question which I can't answer, but which I was attempting to, I suppose I was attempting to push that question on to everybody else through making the actual work.
The other side of this is, any of us looking at Paul's portrait or at Thomas's portrait, or indeed any of the other portraits in the Silent Testimony series, we can empathise with their loss. We can feel sorry for them. There are people who have lost loved ones in the Troubles period who were not innocent bystanders in all of this. Thomas and Paul's grief are the same, or we can see similarities. What about those who had family members who were involved in perpetrating those acts of violence? What about their grief?
I mean, that's something that's not lost on me at all. Therein lies the complexity. Therein lies the near impossible task of collectively, as a society and politically, addressing the past, what we did to each other in this place. My own personal view on it is through making Silent Testimony, which is actually about right now. Silent Testimony acknowledges the past, but it's not about the past, it's about what's left behind. A mother's grief for her son, who was brutally gunned down by walking down the wrong street innocently, is no different from a mother's grief for a son who blew himself up while he was making his own bomb. Now, I have personal views as to the circumstances around that, But my interest is in where we are now and those two mothers' ongoing trauma and grief, unresolved grief, as a result of them suffering loss. Now, that's tricky territory to get into. That's very, very, very precarious. But I look at the people left behind, and I look at the people who are alive today, who we are daily passing in the street. Tens of thousands of people in this part of the world who, to a greater or lesser extent, are still carrying the weight. And that's what interests me. There's nothing we can do about the past, but we can acknowledge the people that are left behind.
There are those who would be like, absolutely beyond anger at the idea that we should think about those who perpetrated violence in the same breath or in the same place as those on whom violence
Well, it's not even thinking about the people who perpetrated it, Sean. It's thinking about the people who are left behind as a result of it. And that, whenever we think about that, we're moving beyond the perpetrator. We're actually moving beyond blame. We're moving beyond lies, truth, all those things to the heart of where we are as a society right now. And as long as we keep hold of that blaming, and as long as we keep hold of that was your fault,
Yeah.
it wasn't my fault, we'll not truly build a new society for ourselves. So I have no desire in any way through silent testimony or any other means to drag anybody into the past or to drag the past into the now. That's the opposite of what I want to do. But what I'm interested in is acknowledging what it was about that which has left us where we are now, and what can we do about that for the future.
Perspective is hugely important in any human interaction, seeing the other point of view, looking at it from the other side. We can't talk about future takes. The society in Northern Ireland, as indeed in the southern part of the island, it's a much more diverse society in many ways now than it was certainly at the beginning of the Troubles. And nowhere on the island was as diverse as it is now. The riots that we saw in both Belfast and Northern Ireland, and indeed in Dublin and in other parts of the country and the island as well. How problematic are they when we start to think about, these were anti-immigrant riots essentially, how problematic are they in terms of a future take?
Well, the big thing that offers me a glimmer of hope is the fact that the marches, the protests, which were against the anti-immigration protests, outnumbered them to a huge degree, and appear to have put short shrift on them. Society generally doesn't want that. We have, hopefully, as a society, and I think it's a generational thing, moved beyond that more narrow-minded view of what a modern society should be. One of the things, and you talk about the future there, Sean, I think one of our problems has been that our sense of identity, particularly in this part of the world, has been too long wrapped up in what we're not rather than what we are. We tend to be pretty expert at expressing what we don't want what we don't believe in, what we think is wrong, but actually not terribly good at explaining what it is that we actually believe in. And I have, I suppose it's a kind of a dream for this part of the world where societally and politically we would, now for this to work, we all have to agree to it. There can't be one person who dissents. But if we were to say, what is it that I can do to help advance your cause? And if we all, every single one of us, ask that question, within that question, there is the germ of a solution to how we start to deal with our past and build a future for ourselves in this part of the world.
What do you think education, apart from enlightening, showing people, but what can education do to help create this potential future space that we've spoken about?
We have a few things going for us just now, Sean, and that is that the current generation going through universities have no memory. The people that make it up have no memory of the dark days. They, in some ways, were born into the positivity that we all experienced in the few years after the Good Friday Agreement. But Northern Ireland still, regrettably, is not doing everything that it can to educate our really young in a more unified way. I think the integrated education system here, there are grammar schools and schools which don't describe themselves as being integrated, which actually are. But I think our future has to involve educating our young kids together. Simple as that.
Of course, we're sitting here only a stone's throw away from Newtownards and Rhys McClenaghan,
Absolutely.
Olympic gold medal winner. And even though you might want to say County Down, Daniel Whiffen, County Armagh, he's very adamant, Olympic gold medal winner, both of them for the Olympics Ireland. Then we have Rebecca Shorten and James McMillan, Olympic medal winners too, and playing, representing Team GB. I mean, all of those, and every Olympian from all parts of the island, huge achievements.
Yeah.
Is there something in that, in accepting that kind of all-embracing joy that can help us towards the future?
I think the sense of ownership, the sense of collective pride that we have, irrespective of what team somebody who was born in Armagh is part of, there is a collective sense of pride there. There is a sense in cheering that person on. And I think you're right, actually, and I think you make a really interesting point. There is something in there which there is a spirit in the middle of that. There is a collective something that we can all get around that is probably bigger than an Olympic gold. The spirit isn't the Olympic gold. The spirit is something more. And it's a case of tapping into that. It'd be interesting to tap into that. It'd be interesting to see what that is that doesn't matter, whether it's Team GB or Ireland. Because surely there's a future in that. My interest is in making this part of the world work. However that is in 10 years' time or 20 years' time? I don't know. But it's about making it work for the people who live here. That's what it's about. And that sense of joy, upbeatness, positivity, pride, that's something which we surely can tap into.